US.
Okay, can we make your Sri Lanka short, because
Yeah.
Bob, we have three more
No,
questions.
sure.
in the
I'll
room.
keep it short. So I'll go for the most explosive one.
As usual.
It would have to be limited to one. No, and no joke. There are reports by some in the IDP camps of the activity of sort of paramilitary, pro-government paramilitary groups, and what's called the disappearance of some IDPs. I wanted to know if the UN's aware of that and is sort of either looking into it and disproving it or documenting it, and also just even where the government is removing people from the camps, whether the UN knows what the protocol is. What is now that there seems to be a second round of culling of sort of like early LTT supporters or sort of philosophical supporters, what is given that you're in the camps, what's the UN's role in making sure that people aren't just taken out arbitrarily? Is there any kind of due process?
Well, of course, we are aware of stories of disappearances from the camps. Those stories have been there almost from the beginning, and they're not a new phenomenon in Sri Lanka. There is a history of disappearances and so on, which makes obviously people, including ourselves, very, very wary about this and very aware of the risks of it. I would say, as a general point, that both the UN agencies which are in the camps and the NGOs have not reported this to us as a major problem. That's not to say it's not happening, but I've seen a lot of press reports about this in the last few months. It hasn't been reported by them as a major issue, and it's very difficult to know the truth of it. I say, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's not been one of our major concerns so far, at least. One of the issues there is that people are taken out of the camps by the authorities, as you say, as part of their screening out of suspect LTT elements. They have the right to do that, and to put them in some kind of process, judicial or otherwise. A lot of them have been taken to rehabilitation centres. I think there are around 10,000 people in those rehabilitation centres. Most of those are put in there before they went into the camps. And there is access to those centres, for example, by the International Red Cross, so there is some kind of check on what is going on there. Now, we can't control that process and exactly how it's operating. Our main concern has been to say this process should be speeded up, because the government say we cannot give freedom of movement to the other IDPs in the camps until we've done the screening process. We are saying that the lack of freedom of movement is a major problem for us, and therefore you must speed up that screening process. Therefore, those who've been screened in, as it were, and are seen as just legitimate IDPs, can get their temporary ID cards, can have the freedom of movement, can go and stay with host families, obviously can return home as soon as possible. That's what we want them to do. So that's our major plank of our concern with the government on this particular score.
Yes, Barbara?
Just a general question about Sri Lanka, which is, how would you describe, how urgent is Mr. Pascoe's mission in humanitarian terms in Sri Lanka?
Well, I say, the situation is that we are extremely frustrated and disappointed by the progress or lack of progress there's been in various areas since the end of the conflict, and in particular by what's been happening to the IDPs in terms of the nature of the camps, the lack of freedom of movement, the lack of progress towards early return, as with lack of progress towards political reconciliation and towards some process of accountability. So there's a whole range of issues that we're extremely concerned about, including the detention of UN staff without charge. So there's, that we have quite a long list there, and the fact that the Secretary General has asked Lynn Pascoe to go there is an illustration of how seriously and how urgently we're taking all those issues. So that that is a reflection of our frustration and disappointment, and wish to see some rapid progress by working with the government and trying to urge them to make the kind of progress which they have promised so often.
Okay, we'll take one last question. If there are none, then yes, sir.
A general question. For example, with the flooding in West Africa, has there been any prospects of cooperation with regional groups like ECOWAS or in West Africa, or any other, like the Horn of Africa, or any other regional groups helping out with your work? Or?
Well, we work very closely with ECOWAS in general, as the UN, and of course they do have a humanitarian sort of interest as well. We work with them very closely, not least through the Special Representative of the Secretary General in West Africa, Saeed Djinnit, who works very closely with ECOWAS. So, we are working with them as we try to work with all regional groups, including the African Union as a whole. But in tackling the Horn of Africa, of course, there are political issues which are dealt with through contacts with IGAD and others. But that doesn't apply particularly on the humanitarian side, where we have to deal with each country as an individual entity, while being aware of the overall problems the region faces.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Thank you all.
Thank you.